The first tendrils of dawn, pale and hesitant, crept through the sheer curtains of Elara Vance's apartment, painting the minimalist walls in shades of muted gray. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a drum solo of dread. 110 beats per minute. Too fast. Always too fast, even in sleep. A cold weight settled in her chest, familiar and unwelcome. She closed her eyes, focusing on the slow, deliberate expansion and contraction of her diaphragm. 1 breath. 2. 3. Each inhale a silent plea for calm. Each exhale a release of the fear that constantly gnawed at the edges of her composure. Her apartment was a testament to control. Every item had its place. Every surface gleamed with an almost obsessive cleanliness. It was her sanctuary, her carefully constructed bubble against a world that threatened to overwhelm her. Here, she could manage the delicate balance of her health, a secret so profound it felt like a second skin. If her emotions spiked, joy, anger, fear, even profound sadness, her heart would race, her breath would catch, and the world would narrow to a suffocating tunnel of pain. A truth, if exposed, that would make her a liability, destroy the last shred of her independence, and emotionally obliterate her. She believed her vulnerability was a burden because she'd seen how others reacted to weakness. They either pitied or exploited it. Deep down, she knew the truth. True strength, she thought, lay in hiding it. She rose, moving with a quiet grace born of habit. The kitchen was a sterile landscape of stainless steel and white quartz. She measured the herbal tea leaves with scientific precision, the earthy scent a grounding anchor. While the water steeped, she moved to the small, sun-drenched nook that served as her workspace. Her graphic design projects were her lifeline to the outside world, a way to earn a living without risking the unpredictable chaos of human interaction. The screen glowed with the vibrant colors of a new client brief, a stark contrast to the muted tones of her morning. A faint murmur from the living room caught her attention. She'd forgotten to mute the small wall-mounted television. A news anchor's voice, clipped and authoritative, filled the silence. Elara glanced over, her gaze snagging on the image flashing across the screen. A man, tall, impossibly broad-shouldered, with dark, intense eyes that seemed to pierce through the lens. Liam Thorne, the caption read. Alpha Billionaire. His name was synonymous with ruthless power, whispered in hushed tones in financial circles and online forums. He was speaking at a press conference, his jawline sharp, his expression unreadable. Elara felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite name, a primal unease, a distant echo of a threat. She frowned, her fingers already reaching for the remote. Too much intensity. Not good for the heart. The image vanished, replaced by a bland commercial. The silence returned, comforting in its predictability. She dismissed the man, the news, the fleeting sense of dread. Her world was here, in this quiet apartment, meticulously controlled, safe. She needed it to stay that way, because what would happen if it didn't? Soon after, the carefully constructed calm of Elara's morning shattered like fragile glass. Her inbox buzzed, a harsh, insistent sound. It was an email from a new client, a demanding tech startup, and the tone was aggressive, accusatory. "The designs are unacceptable," it blared in bold red font. "We need a complete overhaul by end of day. Failure to comply will result in contract termination." Elara's breath hitched. A familiar flutter began in her chest, like a trapped bird beating its wings against her ribs. Her vision blurred at the edges. No, not now. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. She could feel the rapid ascent of her pulse, a frantic drumbeat signaling danger. This was the precipice, the edge where her emotions threatened to drag her over. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to remember the breathing exercises. Inhale, count of 4. Hold, count of 7. Exhale, count of 8. She repeated the mantra, her mind fighting against the rising tide of fear and fury. It was infuriating, this constant battle against her own body. Still, the anger simmered, a hot coal beneath her skin. She wanted to scream, to lash out at the injustice of it all, but she couldn't, because screaming, lashing out, those were luxuries her heart couldn't afford. She imagined her heart as a delicate porcelain vase, beautiful but prone to shattering with the slightest tremor. She had to protect it. She had to protect herself. After a long, agonizing minute, the flutter subsided, replaced by a dull ache. She had managed it. Again. A grim satisfaction settled over her, mixed with the exhaustion of constant vigilance. This was her life, a relentless tightrope walk over an abyss. Despite that, the incident left a tremor in her carefully built composure. The perfect calm of her apartment felt tainted. She needed air, a brief escape from the digital demands and the silent threat of her own body. So, she slipped on her sneakers, grabbed her keys, and headed out for a walk, hoping the cool, crisp air would clear the lingering tension. The city sounds, usually a comforting hum, now seemed sharper, more intrusive. As she turned onto her quiet residential street, a sleek black car caught her eye. It was parked conspicuously, just a few houses down, its tinted windows obscuring the occupants. It looked out of place, too polished, too silent. A shiver of unease ran down her spine, like an unseen hand tracing a cold line down her back. It felt like a predator lurking in the shadows. Why was it there? Who was inside? She didn't know what scared her more, the unknown vehicle or the unsettling feeling that she was being watched. The air thickened around her, charged with an unspoken tension. That night, the unsettling feeling from the black car lingered, a persistent hum beneath Elara's skin. She tried to dismiss it, to tell herself it was just her anxiety, a side effect of her condition. But then, her phone buzzed. It wasn't a text or an email. It was a strange notification from an unknown sender, a cryptic message that popped up on her screen. It wasn't words. Instead, it was a symbol, an intricate, ancient-looking design, a snarling wolf's head with eyes that seemed to glow, etched within a complex, swirling pattern. Her breath caught. It felt old and powerful, and utterly out of place on her modern smartphone. She didn't understand it, but a primal sense of dread coiled in her stomach. She tried to delete it, but the message wouldn't go away. It felt like it was burned onto her screen, a digital brand. Her thoughts spun, trying to rationalize it. Spam? A weird prank? But the image felt too specific, too potent. With every heartbeat, the feeling of being watched intensified. She moved to her window, pulling back the curtain just a fraction. Her heart skipped. The black car was still there. Closer now, parked directly across the street from her building. Its dark windows were like unblinking eyes, staring. A beat later, a figure moved in the driver's seat, a shadow against the tinted glass. Elara couldn't make out any features, but the movement was deliberate, predatory. Her chest ached, a familiar warning sign. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't anxiety. Her world tilted. She felt a sudden, desperate urge to run, to hide, to disappear. But where would she go? Her apartment, once her sanctuary, now felt like a glass cage. She backed away from the window, her hands trembling. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the chilling certainty that she was no longer safe. This wasn't just a ripple in her calm. It was a tidal wave gathering on the horizon. As she quickly retreated into her apartment, the car's engine rumbled to life. The sound was low, powerful, like a growl. It slowly pulled away, melting back into the city's night, leaving Elara with a chilling certainty that she was no longer safe. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with unspoken threats, a stark contrast to the comforting predictability of her life just hours before. Her carefully constructed world had begun to crack, and she knew with a terrifying certainty that it was only a matter of time before it shattered completely. The silence in Elara's apartment was a lie. It hummed with the aftershock of the black car, a phantom vibration against her teeth. She stood in the center of her living room, the cryptic wolf symbol still burned into her mind's eye. Every shadow seemed to deepen, every creak of the building sounded like a footstep. Her heart, already a nervous hummingbird, fluttered wildly. She didn't know what scared her more, the unknown threat or the terrifying certainty that her carefully constructed world was about to explode. Then, the world did explode. A deafening crash ripped through the quiet. The front door, a solid oak barrier, splintered inward with a single brutal blow, torn from its hinges like paper. Wood shrieked, metal groaned. Elara gasped, a sharp, painful intake of breath. Her eyes, wide with terror, fixed on the gaping maw where her sanctuary once stood. Dust motes danced in the sudden, harsh light from the hallway. And then he was there. Liam Thorne. He filled the doorway, a force of nature made flesh. Taller than she remembered from the news, broader, his presence radiating a raw, untamed power that seemed to suck the air from the room. His dark suit, impeccably tailored, did nothing to soften the predatory gleam in his eyes that were the color of molten gold, intense and unwavering, locking onto hers with an almost physical grip. Behind him, a small, elite retinue of men in dark clothing fanned out, their movements silent, efficient, like shadows come to life. They were armed, she realized, her stomach lurching, heavily armed. Elara's heart ceased to beat. For a single agonizing second, everything went still. The dust hung suspended. The shattered doorframe seemed to hold its ragged breath. In that moment, the core emotional question of her life, can Elara truly find freedom and love by embracing her deepest vulnerability? Or will her hidden fragility always make her a liability, forcing her to live a life of emotional isolation? Screamed its first terrifying answer. Liam took a step into her apartment, then another, his gaze never leaving hers. His voice, when it came, was a low, resonant rumble, like distant thunder. It wasn't a question. It was a decree. You are my stolen mate. His words hung in the air, heavy with ancient power, wrapping around her like invisible chains. You belong to me now. Fury, hot and desperate, ignited in Elara's veins, momentarily eclipsing her terror. Stolen mate? Belong to him? The audacity, the sheer arrogant entitlement. Her independence, her very sense of self screamed in protest. No! She choked out, her voice thin but sharp, defying the tremor in her hands. I don't belong to anyone. You have no right. Before she could finish, before she could even move, one of Liam's men, a hulking figure with eyes as cold as chipped ice, moved with startling speed. A hand clamped over her mouth, muffling her desperate cry. Another arm circled her waist, lifting her effortlessly from the floor. She thrashed, a wild, desperate animal caught in a snare, kicking and clawing, but their grip was iron. It was humiliating. It was terrifying. It was the complete obliteration of her independence, just as she'd always feared. Liam watched her struggle, his golden eyes unreadable, a flicker of something. Was it regret? Command? Satisfaction? Passing through them. He gave a curt nod. Take her. Which meant her fight was futile. Her attempts to resist were like a moth beating against a hurricane. She felt the cold press of something against her eyes, a blindfold. Darkness descended, thick and absolute, amplifying the terrifying reality of her situation. The last thing she heard before the sounds of the city faded was the low, powerful hum of an engine, a predator's purr, and the terrifying, inescapable proximity of Liam Thorne's presence. She was being taken, and there was nothing she could do about it. The world outside her apartment, the one she had so carefully kept at bay, had finally swallowed her whole. A jarring lurch, then silence. Elara's head swam, a dull ache throbbing behind her eyes. The blindfold was gone. She blinked, disoriented, the sudden burst of light painful after the prolonged darkness. Her surroundings slowly swam into focus, and her breath hitched. This was not her apartment, not even close. She lay on a bed so vast it felt like a small island, draped in silk sheets that shimmered like liquid moonlight. The room was immense, a symphony of opulence, polished dark wood, soft plush carpets that swallowed sound, and walls adorned with abstract art that seemed to ripple with hidden energy. A wall of floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of a sprawling, manicured estate, stretching out to meet a distant dark forest under a sky painted with the last blush of dawn. It was beautiful. And it was a cage. A gilded, impossibly luxurious cage. Her heart, still recovering from the adrenaline of the abduction, began its frantic flutter again. Control it, control it! She swung her legs over the side of the bed, her muscles protesting. Her immediate goal was to understand her predicament, to map her new prison. She tried the heavy wooden door. Locked. She moved to the windows, testing the massive panes. Solid. Immovable. Even if they weren't, the sheer drop outside, followed by acres of open, manicured lawn, offered no escape. Panic, cold and sharp, began to build again, threatening to overwhelm her. This was worse than she imagined. Just like that, the door clicked open. Liam Thorne stepped inside, his presence filling the already vast room. He moved with an effortless grace, a predator in his natural habitat. He wore a fresh, casual shirt now, the sleeves rolled to reveal powerful forearms, but his golden eyes still held that unnerving intensity. He carried a tray with a steaming cup and a plate of fruit, setting it on a small table near the window. He didn't offer it to her. He simply placed it there, an offering to a captive. "You're awake," he stated, his voice calm, devoid of the earlier aggression, yet somehow more chilling in its detached authority. He didn't ask how she felt. He didn't ask if she was okay. He simply observed her, like a scientist studying a specimen. "This is your new situation, Elara." He used her name, and it felt like a violation, a claim. "You are my fated mate, a bond forged by ancient pacts, long before either of us drew breath." Elara stared at him, her mind reeling. Ancient pacts? Fated mate? It sounded like something out of a fantasy novel, not her terrifying reality. "I don't believe in fated mates," she spat, her voice trembling but defiant. "And I don't belong to anyone. You kidnapped me." Liam's expression remained impassive. "Believe what you will. The truth remains. Your cooperation is not optional." He gestured vaguely around the room. "These are your amenities. Anything you require, speak to my attendants. They will ensure your comfort." His tone was cold, practical, completely disregarding her protests, her very humanity. He was treating her like a prized possession, not a person. This man, the Alpha Billionaire, was a monster in a tailored suit. He walked towards the door. "I have matters to attend to. My beta, Marcus, will be your primary contact." He paused, his hand on the ornate doorknob, and his gaze swept over her, lingering for a fraction too long. "Do not attempt to leave. It will only make things more unpleasant." And just like that, he was gone. The door clicked shut, the sound echoing the finality of her new captive status. Moments later, a stern-faced woman in a crisp uniform entered, her eyes watchful, unyielding. "I am Anya," she said, her voice flat. "I am here to assist you." Her presence reinforced Elara's lack of freedom, a constant reminder that she was under surveillance. Elara walked to the panoramic window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The vast, unfamiliar landscape stretched before her, beautiful yet menacing. She felt utterly alone, a bird in a golden cage, and the rage and fear warring within her constantly pushed her fragile health to the brink. She knew with chilling certainty that her struggle to maintain emotional control while raging against her captivity would be the defining battle of her new reality. The days that followed blurred into a suffocating routine of opulent captivity. Elara, under Anya's constant watchful eye, was escorted through various parts of Liam's sprawling estate. She observed, always observed. The sheer scale of the place was overwhelming. Vast halls, grand staircases, and rooms filled with priceless artifacts. She noticed the subtle tension that hummed beneath the surface, especially among the staff. Some moved with quiet deference, others with a nervous energy hinting at an underlying fear of Liam. This was not just a home, it was a fortress, a seat of power. That night, Elara was informed she would be joining Liam for dinner. Her heart hammered, a frantic drum against her ribs. This wasn't a request. It was a command. Anya led her down a long, echoing corridor to a formal dining room. The air was thick with the scent of rich food and something else, something metallic, like ozone, that prickled her skin. Liam was already seated at the head of a massive, polished table, flanked by two other men. One was Marcus, the beta Liam had mentioned, a man with a quiet strength and eyes that missed nothing. The other, a lean, sharp-featured man with an air of cold calculation, was introduced as Alaric, Liam's chief operations officer. The conversation was veiled, a dance of corporate jargon and subtle power plays. They spoke of market shares, hostile takeovers, and territorial disputes. Elara, despite her terror, maintained a stoic facade, her face a mask of polite disinterest. But inside, her mind raced, absorbing every nuance. She noticed the way Alaric's eyes flickered to Liam, a hint of something that wasn't quite loyalty in their depths. An open loop, a question that hung in the air. Was Alaric truly loyal, or was there something else lurking beneath the surface? Liam, for his part, was a master of control. His voice was low, authoritative, cutting through the polite chatter like a sharpened blade. He spoke of maintaining stability and securing our legacy. He glanced at Elara, his golden eyes briefly meeting hers. In that moment, he made a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture, a slight inclination of his head towards Marcus, then back to her. It was a silent message, implying her cooperation was essential for the pack's stability, subtly linking her fate to theirs without revealing her fragile condition. It was a chilling reminder of the weight she carried, a secret that could shatter everything. Alaric, on the other hand, was more outwardly charming, but his smiles never quite reached his eyes. He spoke of necessary sacrifices and unforeseen complications, his words laced with a subtle venom that seemed directed at Liam. Elara felt a prickle of unease. There was a tension between Liam and Alaric, a silent battle for dominance that had nothing to do with her, yet everything to do with her new reality. She realized Liam wasn't just a billionaire, he was an alpha, and his world was far more complex and dangerous than she could have ever imagined. As the tense meal concluded, Liam rose. "Elara," he said, his voice softer than before, almost a command for her to relax. "Marcus will ensure you have everything you need." He didn't dismiss her, but rather acknowledged her presence, a subtle shift in their dynamic. She was still a captive, but perhaps a valuable one. After the strained dinner, Elara was escorted back to her room, the weight of her new reality settling heavily upon her. The opulence felt suffocating, the silence deafening. She walked to the window, staring out at the impenetrable darkness of the forest that bordered the estate. She realized she couldn't just escape. She had to understand this world, its rules, its threats, and Liam's place within it. Her immediate goal had shifted. It was no longer just about fleeing. It was about gathering information, about understanding the true nature of her captivity and the world she'd been forced into. She had to protect her secret, because if it was exposed, she would truly be a liability, and her last shred of independence would be gone forever. This was a longer game, a more dangerous one, and she knew, with a cold, calculating determination, that she had to play it if she hoped to regain any semblance of control. Days bled into weeks within Liam Thorne's sprawling estate, and Elara's initial terror slowly morphed into a simmering, frustrated determination. Her immediate goal was to map her new prison, to find its weaknesses, because she refused to be a passive captive. She was still a bird in a gilded cage, but she was learning the dimensions of her confinement. Anya, the stern attendant, was a constant shadow, her presence a heavy reminder of Elara's lack of freedom. Yet, Elara saw more than just a guard. She saw a system, a network. Elara began her quiet exploration, always within the permitted areas, which were still vast enough to feel like a small kingdom. She observed the pack dynamics, the unspoken rules that governed the staff and the few other residents she occasionally glimpsed. There was a rigid hierarchy, a quiet deference to Liam that bordered on reverence. She noticed subtle tensions, too. A hushed conversation between two guards quickly silenced when she approached, a flicker of resentment in a maid's eyes when Anya barked an order. These were tiny cracks in the polished facade, and Elara, with her keen eye for detail, filed them away. She knew, deep down, that discord was a weakness, and she was looking for every single one. More importantly, she tried to access communication devices. The estate was a technological marvel, but every screen, every phone, every network was locked down, secured or monitored. She tried the guest Wi-Fi, hoping for a loophole, but it was a dead end. She even tried to slip a note to a delivery person, but Anya, as if summoned by an invisible bell, appeared instantly, her gaze sharp and disapproving. Elara felt a mix of frustration at her failures and a growing respect for the meticulousness of Liam's security. He wasn't just powerful. He was thorough. Still, her resentment simmered. This wasn't freedom. This wasn't a life. It was an existence dictated by an arrogant alpha who had simply taken her. She carefully managed her emotional responses, because every surge of anger, every spike of despair, threatened her fragile heart. She imagined her emotions as wild horses, constantly straining against the reins she held so tightly. She couldn't afford a stampede. One afternoon, during a supervised walk through the estate's sprawling gardens, Elara noticed a small, almost hidden path veering off into a dense, overgrown section. Anya's attention was momentarily diverted by a call on her earpiece. Without thinking, Elara veered off the paved path, her curiosity overriding caution. She pushed through a curtain of overgrown vines, the air suddenly cooler, thicker, smelling of damp earth and ancient trees. The sounds of the manicured estate faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of unseen birds. Just like that, she found herself in a small, secluded clearing. It looked like an old, forgotten garden, wild and untamed. And then she heard voices, low, intense. Liam's voice, and another, stern-faced and unfamiliar. Elara froze, pressing herself against the thick trunk of an ancient oak hidden by its gnarled branches. She caught only fragments. Corporate restructuring, the breach, rival Alpha's influence. What followed was a hushed, heated exchange. The words too low to discern, but the tension was palpable like a coiled spring. The unfamiliar man was tall, with a sharp, almost predatory profile. She didn't recognize him from the dining room. This was a restricted area, a secret meeting. This was a new open loop, a piece of the puzzle she didn't yet understand. Before she could move, Anya's voice, sharp with alarm, pierced the air. "Elara, what are you doing?" Elara quickly retreated, her heart pounding, but the glimpse of Liam and the unknown man, their voices low and intense, left her with a chilling certainty that there were far more dangerous games being played within these walls than just her captivity. This was a world of shadows, and she was only just beginning to see them. The next morning, before the words left her lips to ask about the hidden garden, Anya informed Elara that Liam required her presence at a strategic meeting. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. Elara's stomach clenched. She knew this was another test, another step deeper into Liam's world. Her goal was to remain inconspicuous, to absorb as much information as possible about the threats Liam faced, because her safety was now inextricably linked to his. The meeting room was a stark contrast to the opulent living quarters. It was a sleek, modern space, all glass and polished chrome, overlooking the city skyline. Liam sat at the head of a long, dark table, his presence dominating the room. Marcus was there, along with Alaric, the COO, whose eyes held a subtle, unsettling glint. Other men and women, sharp-suited and grim-faced, filled the remaining seats. No matter how hard she tried, Elara felt like an anomaly, a splash of color in a monochrome world. The air thickened with tension. The conversation revolved around complex financial maneuvers, hostile takeovers, and the encroachment of rival factions. Elara sat silently, observing. She witnessed Liam's cold efficiency, his ruthless intellect. He cut through arguments with surgical precision, his voice calm but laced with an undeniable authority that commanded fear and respect in equal measure. He was a force, a storm in human form. Then a new voice entered the fray, sharp and mocking from a speakerphone on the table. It belonged to a man named Kale, the representative of a rival corporation, and his tone was dripping with veiled threats. "Thorne, your hold is slipping, your pack grows weak. Perhaps it's time for new leadership." The words hung in the air, a challenge. Elara felt a chill. This wasn't just corporate rivalry. It was something primal, something ancient. Liam's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. His golden eyes, usually so controlled, flared with a sudden, raw intensity. For a fleeting moment, Elara saw it, a flash of something wild, untamed, a primal beast lurking just beneath the surface of his polished exterior. A low, guttural growl rumbled deep in his chest, barely audible, but it vibrated through the room, a silent warning. The air thickened. Every person at the table stiffened, their gazes fixed on Liam, a collective intake of breath. The tension broke. Kale's voice, though still arrogant, lost a fraction of its bite. Liam had shown them a glimpse of the beast, and it was terrifying. Elara felt a chilling awe. This was the true power she was up against, a force that transcended mere wealth. She realized, with a renewed sense of danger, that escaping Liam wasn't just about unlocking doors. It was about outmaneuvering a predator. This glimpse of his inner beast, his ruthlessness, made her feel even more like a potential liability if her secret were known. Because how could she, with her fragile heart, survive in a world ruled by such raw power? Later, back in her room, the image of Liam's blazing eyes haunted her. She needed to understand this world. She needed answers. As if fate demanded it, her gaze fell upon a rare, ancient book lying on a side table. It hadn't been there before. Perhaps Anya had left it, or maybe Liam himself. It was old, its leather-bound cover worn smooth with age. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the faded title, Whispers of the Moonbound. She opened it, and it fell open to a page discussing fated mates and ancient pacts, the words speaking of bonds deeper than blood, of souls intertwined across generations. Her curiosity sparked, a small flame against the vast darkness of her captivity. This book, she instinctively knew, held secrets that might explain everything. The ancient book became Elara's constant companion, its pages filled with cryptic lore of shifters, pack laws, and the intricate dance of fated mates. She devoured every word, piecing together the bizarre reality she'd been thrust into. The concept of a stolen mate now made a terrifying, albeit fantastical kind of sense within this world. Her goal was to understand, to gather information, because knowledge was power, even in a golden cage. Meanwhile, her restlessness grew. Understanding wasn't enough. She needed to act. She needed to test the boundaries. She noticed one of Anya's habits, a small, almost imperceptible pause by a specific antique cabinet in the main hall every morning. It was too regular. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just her desperate need for a win. One morning, as Anya was momentarily distracted by a delivery, Elara made her move. Her body moved on instinct, a blur of motion. She brushed past the cabinet, her fingers subtly, expertly sliding across its ornate carvings. She felt it, a small, almost invisible seam, a hidden compartment. In the span of a breath, her fingers dipped inside, retrieving a small, flat data chip. It was a tiny victory, a spark of defiance. Her heart raced, but this time, it was with exhilaration, not fear. She felt a surge of triumph, a small crack in the suffocating walls of her captivity. She secreted the chip away, her mind already buzzing with possibilities. What information could it hold? Corporate secrets? Pack vulnerabilities? Her own file? She didn't know what scared her more, the potential contents or the risk she had just taken. Later that afternoon, a summons came, not from Anya, but directly from Liam. Her heart skipped. Had he known? Had he seen? The air thickened as she entered his private study, a room filled with the scent of old leather and Liam's distinct, powerful scent. He was standing by the massive window, his back to her, looking out at the sprawling estate. He didn't turn immediately. The silence roared, amplifying her anxiety. When her name left his lips, Elara. It was soft, yet it resonated with an undeniable authority. He turned slowly, his golden eyes fixing on hers. There was no anger there, no fury, only a chillingly calm display of his awareness. "I believe," he began, his voice a low purr, "you found something interesting this morning." Elara's breath caught. He knew. Of course he knew. He was an Alpha Billionaire, a master of control. She felt a mix of frustration at her failure and a grudging respect for his cunning. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. A growl rose in his throat, a soft, warning rumble. "Don't insult my intelligence, Elara." He took a step closer, and the space between them burned with unspoken tension. "That cabinet is a private access point for sensitive data. You are resourceful, I'll give you that." His eyes held hers, a flicker of something akin to curiosity or even a hint of respect passing through them. But this is not a game. There are forces at play you cannot comprehend. Your defiance, while admirable, puts you in grave danger, and it puts us in danger. He didn't demand the chip back. He didn't threaten her directly. Instead, he simply extended his hand, palm up. "Give it to me." His voice was quiet, but the command was absolute. Elara hesitated, her mind racing. This was a test, a subtle warning. She knew, deep down, the truth. She was outmatched, for now. With a single glance, she understood the formidable nature of her opponent. She slowly, reluctantly placed the chip in his outstretched palm. His fingers brushed hers, a spark of unexpected heat. Liam closed his hand around the chip, his gaze still holding hers. "Good," he murmured, a hint of something unreadable in his tone. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door, looking back at her. His expression was unreadable, but a flicker of something, curiosity, respect, danced in his golden eyes. He left her unsettled, her heart still racing, the stakes subtly raised. She had tested the boundaries, and she had learned a crucial lesson. Liam Thorne was always one step ahead. Her path to freedom, she realized, would be far more intricate than she had ever imagined. The air in Liam's estate had grown heavy, not just with the scent of polished wood and expensive flowers, but with a palpable tension. Elara, now more attuned to the subtle currents of Liam's world, felt it like a hum beneath her skin. Her recent attempt to gather information, though thwarted, had sharpened her senses. She was no longer just a prisoner. She was an observer, a quiet analyst in a gilded cage. Her goal was to expose the corporate threat, partly out of self-preservation, partly because a grudging sense of responsibility for Liam's precarious situation had begun to take root. How could she escape if his entire world crumbled around them? One afternoon, while Anya was distracted by a series of urgent calls, Elara found herself in a bustling wing of the corporate headquarters, a place usually off-limits. She was supposed to be reviewing some pack history documents Liam had provided. But her eyes, ever watchful, caught something else. A junior executive, usually meticulous, was hunched over a terminal, his face pale, his movements jerky. He was attempting to transfer massive files, but his hands trembled, and his eyes darted nervously towards the door. It was a data breach attempt, she realized, a slow, insidious bleed of information. She tried to subtly alert Liam. Later that day, during one of their terse, supervised check-ins, Elara tried to mention the executive. "I noticed something unusual in the data wing," she began, her voice carefully neutral. A young man seemed distressed, moving files. Liam merely raised an eyebrow, his golden eyes unreadable. "My security is impenetrable, Elara. My staff is loyal." His dismissal was immediate, arrogant, and infuriating. He was accustomed to being in control, to having all the answers. He couldn't fathom that a stolen mate might see something he didn't. Elara felt a surge of frustration, a familiar heat in her chest. She was powerless, trapped, and her warnings were ignored. It was like shouting into a void because he simply wouldn't listen. Yet, a spark of determination ignited within her. She wouldn't be dismissed. She wouldn't be a liability. She had to prove her worth, not just for herself, but for the fragile stability that now, strangely, included her. She began to observe the executive more closely, noting his patterns, his furtive glances, the way he always seemed to be near Alaric, Liam's COO. An open loop began to form. Was Alaric involved? Was this the betrayal from within the story structure had hinted at? The pressure building around Liam was palpable. The news channels, even the ones Elara only glimpsed, spoke of market instability, of Thorne enterprises facing unprecedented challenges. Liam himself seemed more strained, his jaw tighter, his movements sharper. One evening, during a tense moment where Liam was clearly stressed by a corporate crisis, a frantic call about a collapsed deal echoing from his study, Elara accidentally overheard a fragment of an old conversation. A name, whispered low and urgent. The Blackwood Pact. And a place. The old quarry. It triggered a faint, half-forgotten memory from her own distant past, a childhood whisper she couldn't quite grasp. It was like a ghost of a memory just out of reach, but it sent a shiver down her spine. The pieces were beginning to connect, but the picture was still terrifyingly unclear. The fragment of memory, the Blackwood Pact, gnawed at Elara. It felt significant, a key to the gilded cage she inhabited. Her goal had shifted from pure escape to understanding the truth of her lineage and this bizarre stolen mate claim. She knew with certainty that this was more than just a random abduction. Maybe it was fate, maybe it was just a desperate need for answers, but she had to confront Liam. She found him in his study, late that night, surrounded by glowing screens filled with complex data. He looked exhausted, lines of stress etched around his golden eyes. The corporate crisis was clearly taking its toll. "Liam," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I need to know. Why me? Why stolen mate? What is the Blackwood Pact?" He stilled, his broad shoulders tensing. He turned slowly, his gaze heavy. The air thickened. "You heard that?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Enough," she countered, her chin lifting. "Enough to know this isn't just about you wanting a mate. This is about something older, something binding." She felt a confusing, intense pull towards him, a magnetic force that defied her fear, a desire pooling low in her belly. This man, her captor, was also her fated other. The contradiction was maddening. As the silence stretched, Liam sighed, a sound heavy with weariness. He walked to a large, antique globe, his fingers tracing the continents. "You weren't stolen, Elara," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper, yet it resonated with an undeniable truth. "You were given, by your ancestors, to mine." He turned to face her, his eyes holding a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "The Blackwood Pact, an ancient agreement between our families, centuries old. A binding agreement meant to unite our lines, to strengthen our bloodlines, to prevent a war that nearly tore the shifter world apart. Elara felt a profound shock. Given, not stolen, this changed everything. It was a betrayal, yes, but from generations past, not from Liam directly. Her emotional walls, so carefully constructed, began to crack under the weight of ancient history and this burgeoning, undeniable desire. "My family, they knew," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "They knew," Liam confirmed, his voice rough. "Both sides. It was to be honored when the fated pair reached maturity." He paused, his gaze softening, a flicker of deep pain in his eyes. I had a mate once. Before you." His voice dropped, raw with a past betrayal. "Her name was Camilla. She was taken from me. Murdered. By someone I trusted implicitly. It left me broken and ruthless. Because I swore I would never be weak again. I swore I would never lose what was mine again." The confession hung in the air, a fragile bridge of trust built amidst the chaos. His vulnerability was a revelation, a crack in the Alpha's armor. And just like that, everything changed. The ignition of chemistry between them was undeniable, a burning, intense fire. It wasn't just physical, it was soul-deep, a recognition of their fated bond beyond mere claim. This was the pivotal midpoint. The stolen narrative was overturned, changing their dynamic from captive to fated, albeit unwilling, partners. The core emotional question now included the possibility of finding freedom within a fated bond, a terrifying, exhilarating prospect. Elara's heart raced, not with fear, but with a confusing mix of betrayal, desire, and a burgeoning, dangerous hope. The revelation of the Blackwood Pact and Liam's raw confession left Elara reeling, her carefully constructed emotional walls cracking under the weight of ancient history and burgeoning desire. She felt a profound shock and betrayal, but also a confusing, intense pull towards Liam, a feeling she fought desperately due to her health. The space between them burned with a new, unspoken understanding. But then, the world outside their fragile bubble erupted. Without warning, the estate's alarms blared, a piercing shriek that cut through the silence. Red lights flashed, casting ominous shadows. Liam's eyes, still soft from his confession, hardened instantly, snapping back to the ruthless Alpha. "They're here," he growled, his voice a low rumble. Kale. The rival Alpha, Kale, had made his move. This wasn't just a corporate attack, it was a direct assault on Liam's territory, a brazen act of war. Reports flooded in from Marcus. A breach at the perimeter, simultaneous sabotage attempts at key corporate data centers, and a direct assault on one of Liam's smaller, more vulnerable pack outposts. Kyle wasn't just trying to destabilize Liam, he was trying to dismantle him piece by piece and claim everything, including Elara. Liam's instincts surged. He moved with lightning speed, grabbing a comms device. "Marcus, secure the inner perimeter. Anya, get Elara to the safe room now." His voice was pure command, but as he turned to push Elara towards the door, his golden eyes met hers. There was fierce possessiveness there, yes, but also a nascent concern for her safety that went beyond just her being his mate. He was protecting her, not just claiming her. Elara felt a surge of fear, but also a surprising protective instinct towards Liam despite herself. This was no longer just about her captivity. This was about survival. "No!" she cried, pulling away from Anya. "I'm not going to a safe room. What can I do?" Her heart pounded, but it was a warrior's beat, not a victim's. The danger forced her to acknowledge the true peril of this new world and her place within it. Liam hesitated, his gaze sharp, assessing. He saw the fire in her eyes, the fierce determination. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice clipped. "And don't get in the way." He didn't wait for an answer. He moved, a blur of power, towards a hidden panel that revealed a secure weapons cache. Meanwhile, the sounds of conflict grew louder. Shouts, the guttural snarls of shifters, the distant crackle of energy weapons. The air filled with the coppery scent of blood and the musky odor of enraged wolves. Elara watched Liam arm himself, his movements fluid and deadly, She felt it, clear as day, the primal power radiating from him, the Alpha preparing for battle. The external threats, corporate and rival Alpha, were now fully active and intertwined with Elara's personal safety. This forced Elara and Liam into a defensive alliance, escalating the stakes and pushing them closer, despite Elara's internal conflict regarding her health and the growing attraction. As the immediate danger subsided, the initial wave of Kale's attack repelled, Elara found herself looking at Liam not just as her captor, but as a complex, dangerous, yet undeniably compelling figure. Her heart still raced from the adrenaline and the conflicting emotions. He was a force of nature, a protector, and a man burdened by a past that mirrored her own hidden vulnerabilities. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but for the first time, Elara felt a strange sense of purpose. She was no longer just a stolen mate. She was a part of this, and she would fight for her place. The air in Liam's corporate headquarters crackled with a new kind of energy, tense, focused, and laced with a desperate urgency. The aftermath of Kyle's assault still lingered, a faint scent of ozone and burnt wiring in the ventilation system. Elara, no longer confined to her gilded cage, found herself in Liam's war room, a sleek, glass-walled command center overlooking the city. Her heart still pounded from the adrenaline of the recent attack, but it was a different kind of beat now, a rhythm of purpose, not just fear. Her goal was clear: expose the corporate betrayer, because her own safety, and perhaps her very future, was now inextricably tied to Liam's success. Liam, usually a monolith of controlled power, showed subtle signs of strain. His jaw was tighter, his golden eyes rarely leaving the holographic displays that flickered with data. Yet, he no longer dismissed her. Instead, he treated her as a reluctant, yet valuable, ally. "We need to find the leak," he stated, his voice a low growl, sweeping a hand across a screen displaying a labyrinthine corporate network. "Someone within my inner circle fed Kale the intel for the synchronized attacks. They knew our vulnerabilities." Elara leaned closer to the holographic display, her graphic design background giving her an intuitive grasp of the data flow. Her mind, sharp and analytical, began to connect patterns Liam's alpha instincts might overlook. "This isn't just about a data breach," she murmured, tracing a finger across a suspicious spike in financial transfers. "This is about a systematic dismantling. Someone wants to bleed you dry before the final strike." She felt a strange thrill in contributing, a spark of determination to prove her worth beyond being a stolen mate. She was not just a liability, she was an asset. Their collaborative efforts were a tense, fascinating dance. Liam, with his vast resources and network, provided the raw data. Elara, with her keen observation skills and human understanding of corporate subterfuge, sifted through it, looking for the subtle tells, the human element in the digital noise. He was the brute force, the alpha. She was the scalpel, the strategist. Their personalities, once clashing, now complemented each other in a strange, compelling way. There were moments of unexpected understanding, a shared glance over a suspicious document, a dry, almost imperceptible smirk when they uncovered a particularly convoluted shell company. "Look at this," Elara pointed, her finger hovering over a series of transactions. These funds were routed through a series of offshore accounts, then back into a holding company that's linked to a shell corporation owned by a subsidiary of Thorne Enterprises. It's a classic embezzlement scheme designed to look like a complex foreign investment. Her pulse quickened, but it was with the thrill of the chase, not fear. Liam's eyes narrowed, following her lead. "Alaric," he breathed, his voice laced with a dangerous calm. "He oversees all foreign investments." The open loop from Act 3, the subtle tension between Liam and Alaric, now snapped shut with chilling clarity. Alaric, the charming COO, was the betrayer within. It was a plot twist Elara had suspected, but the confirmation sent a shiver down her spine. The stakes had just become intensely personal. As a result, their investigation became a race against time. They uncovered more clues, digital breadcrumbs leading directly to Alaric's meticulously hidden tracks. They found encrypted communications, coded messages that hinted at Kale's involvement in the corporate sabotage, revealing a deeper, more coordinated conspiracy. The rival Alpha and the corporate betrayer were working in tandem, a two-pronged attack designed to bring Liam to his knees. This discovery solidified their working partnership, moving beyond mere fated attraction. Elara was actively participating in Liam's world, no longer just a captive, signifying her commitment to navigating this new, dangerous reality. The relentless pressure of their investigation, combined with the constant, terrifying proximity to Liam, began to take its toll on Elara. Her heart, already a fragile instrument, struggled to keep pace with the escalating stress. She felt it, a constant flutter beneath her ribs, a tightness in her chest that made every breath a conscious effort. Her goal was to protect herself, to maintain her composure, but also to test the waters of trust with Liam, because she knew she couldn't face this alone. One evening, deep into their work, hunched over a glowing map of Kale's known territories, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The room spun, her vision blurred, the sharp lines of the holographic map dissolving into a kaleidoscope of colors. Her hands trembled, a cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. She tried to hide it, to simply stand up and walk away, but her legs felt like jelly. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to breathe, to control the rising panic. Not now, not in front of him. But Liam, attuned to every shift in her presence, noticed. His head snapped up, his golden eyes, usually so sharp, softening with immediate concern. "Elara?" His voice was low, a rumble of worry. He was by her side in an instant, his large hand gently, almost hesitantly touching her arm. His scent, a primal mix of forest and power, filled her senses, both grounding and overwhelming. She flinched, pulling away instinctively. The fear of rejection, of being seen as a liability, was a deeply ingrained misbelief, a wound from a past where her fragility had always led to dismissal or pity. But his touch lingered, warm and steady. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice laced with an urgency that transcended mere alpha command. Her internal debate raged. To tell or not to tell. The words felt like lead on her tongue. It was a terrifying risk. What if he saw her as weak? What if he cast her aside, believing her a burden? But the danger was too great, the need for understanding too profound. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. She felt terrified of rejection and exposure, but also a desperate need for understanding and support. "My heart," she whispered, the words barely audible, raw with vulnerability. "It's fragile." She looked into his eyes, a desperate plea for understanding. High emotions, fear, anger, even intense joy. They can trigger an episode. My pulse races, my blood pressure spikes. It can kill me. She didn't reveal the full extent, the specific diagnosis, but she laid bare the core truth of her physical fragility. Liam's expression shifted, a complex mix of shock, concern, and a flicker of deep vulnerability. His hand tightened on her arm, not in a possessive grip, but in a gesture of support. "Kill you?" His voice was rough, laced with a fear she hadn't expected. He looked away for a moment, his jaw tight, then back at her. I lost someone once, Elara. Camilla. A betrayal. The pain. It made me ruthless. It made me swear I would never be vulnerable again. Never lose what was mine." He took a deep breath, his gaze meeting hers, raw and exposed. "The thought of losing you, because of me, it's unbearable." The shared secret hung heavy between them, a fragile bridge of trust built amidst the chaos. It was a critical turning point for their relationship. Elara had taken a monumental risk by revealing her vulnerability, directly addressing the liability aspect of the core question. Liam's reaction, showing genuine concern rather than dismissal, began to dismantle her misbelief about her weakness. The air thickened, charged with unspoken emotions. The intimacy of the moment, forged in shared fear and raw honesty, ignited a deeper, more profound connection between them. A sizzling physical romance now intertwined with a burgeoning emotional bond. The vulnerability didn't weaken them, it strengthened them, setting the stage for the ultimate test of their fragile alliance. The revelation of Elara's fragile heart had changed everything. Liam, now aware of the invisible threat she carried, moved with a newfound caution, his protectiveness amplified, yet tempered by a burgeoning respect for her resilience. Their bond, forged in shared secrets and desperate trust, pulsed with a raw, undeniable intensity. Their goal was to expose Alaric and neutralize Cale, and they had a plan. They set their trap in the heart of Thorne Enterprises' main server farm, a sprawling, humming cavern of blinking lights and cool, recycled air. The plan was meticulous. Elara, using her tech savvy, would plant a digital breadcrumb, a false trail designed to lure Alaric into revealing his final damning move. Meanwhile, Liam and Marcus would be positioned to intercept him. They moved with quiet efficiency, a well-oiled machine, their movements synchronized despite the internal tension. Elara's heart pounded, but it was a warrior's beat, a rhythm of anticipation, not fear. She felt a powerful surge of adrenaline and fear, but also a fierce, protective loyalty towards Liam that overrode her self-preservation instincts. "He's taking the bait," Liam murmured into his comms, his voice tight with anticipation, his golden eyes fixed on a monitor. "He's accessing the dummy file." But then, the world exploded again. Not with a crash, but with a sudden, jarring silence. The humming servers died. The blinking lights winked out. Darkness descended, thick and absolute, broken only by the emergency red glow of the exit signs. A cold, metallic scent filled the air. Ozone, but sharper, more acrid. "Ambush!" Liam roared, his voice cutting through the sudden quiet. From the shadows, figures emerged. Not Alaric's corporate thugs, but the hulking, snarling forms of shifters. Kyle. He had intervened, turning their trap against them. The rival Alpha had anticipated their move, perhaps tipped off by Alaric, who had clearly been playing a deeper game than they realized. The fight was brutal, a chaotic ballet of raw power and desperate defense. Liam, with a guttural growl, unleashed more of his beast. His form blurred, a whirlwind of muscle and fury tearing through Cale's pack. The sounds of impact, of bone against flesh, echoed in the sudden silence of the server room. Elara, caught in the crossfire, felt her heart hammer against her ribs, a frantic drum solo. The sheer emotional and physical intensity of the fight was a direct assault on her fragile health. Her vision swam, but she couldn't collapse, not now. Not when Liam was fighting for their lives. She saw a massive shifter, twice Liam's size, lunging at his blind spot, a glint of metal in its hand, a poisoned blade. Without thinking, her body moved on instinct. She saw a loose server rack, precariously balanced. With a desperate surge of strength, she shoved it. The heavy metal groaned, then toppled with a deafening crash, creating a crucial diversion, a wall of sparks and twisted wires between Liam and his attacker. The shifter roared in frustration, momentarily disoriented. That's why Liam had the opening he needed. He spun, his movements fluid, and delivered a devastating blow that sent the shifter sprawling. He turned back to Elara, his golden eyes blazing with a mix of fury and something else, a fierce, protective awe. She had saved him. Her wits, her quick thinking, her fragile body had just turned the tide. The fight raged on, but the element of surprise was gone. Liam, now fully aware of Cale's deeper conspiracy with Alaric, fought with a renewed, savage intensity. They barely escaped, battered and bruised, Liam carrying a weakened Elara, her heart still racing but steady. The weight of their shared near-death experience deepened their connection, solidifying their resolve. Their bond was forged in fire, a testament to their mutual reliance. They were inextricably linked, challenging the freedom aspect of the core question in a new, profound way. The trap had been sprung, but in its chaos, they had found a new strength, a new understanding of what they were fighting for together. The aftermath of the server farm ambush left Elara and Liam battered, but alive. Their escape had been a desperate scramble, Liam's raw power barely enough to carve a path through Cale's forces. Elara's heart, though steady, thrummed with exhaustion. They had survived, but the victory felt hollow. It was a temporary reprieve, a quiet before the real storm. Her goal, to help Liam mitigate the damage, felt overwhelming, because the scale of the disaster was becoming terrifyingly clear. What followed was a brutal, relentless assault on Liam's empire. Alaric, the corporate betrayer, had not just anticipated their move. He had used it as a smokescreen for his final, devastating blow. News channels, usually filled with glowing reports of Thorne enterprises, now screamed headlines of scandal and collapse. Financial analysts spoke in hushed, grave tones about unprecedented market instability. It wasn't just a data breach. It was a public execution of Liam's corporate legacy. Liam's war room, once a hub of controlled power, now buzzed with frantic energy. But it was the energy of despair. Screens flickered with plummeting stock prices, frozen assets, and leaked documents that painted Liam in the darkest possible light. The whispers of corruption and unethical practices spread like wildfire. Liam, usually unshakable, was forced to retreat, his power significantly weakened. He paced like a caged beast, his golden eyes blazing with a fury Elara had never seen, a mix of rage and disbelief. He was losing control, and the sight of it sent a cold dread through Elara. "They've frozen our primary accounts," Marcus reported, his voice tight with strain. "The board is calling for an emergency vote of no confidence. Alaric has orchestrated this perfectly. He's feeding the media, planting false narratives. He's claiming Liam's instability, his nature, makes him unfit to lead." The implication hung heavy in the air. Alaric was weaponizing Liam's shifter identity, twisting it into a narrative of dangerous unpredictability. Elara watched, her stomach churning. She felt overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster, witnessing the rapid unraveling of his power. It was like watching a colossal skyscraper crumble, brick by agonizing brick. She felt a creeping despair, seeing the tangible consequences of the betrayal. This scene showed the antagonists' formidable power and the devastating impact of their actions. It stripped Liam of his usual control and resources, forcing him into a more vulnerable position, which in turn affected Elara directly. Her own safety, her very existence within this world, depended on Liam's stability. More importantly, the corporate collapse wasn't the only front. Kyle, the rival Alpha, seized the opportunity. In the chaos, Liam received news of a direct attack on a vulnerable part of his territory. The old quarry, the very place Elara had overheard in Liam's hushed conversation. "They're targeting the Omega Sanctuary," Marcus announced, his voice cracking with emotion. "Kale's forces are overwhelming them. They're going for the weakest members of our pack." Liam slammed his fist on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. His face was a mask of tormented fury. The Omega Sanctuary was a place of refuge for the most vulnerable shifters, the elderly, the young, those unable to fight. Kale wasn't just attacking Liam's power. He was attacking his heart, his responsibility as an alpha. This forced Liam to make a desperate choice: defend his crumbling corporate empire or protect his most vulnerable pack members. The weight of his world was crushing him, and Elara felt the tremors of it deep in her own fragile heart. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test them both to their absolute limits. The choice was agonizing, but for Liam, it was no choice at all. His corporate empire might be crumbling, but his pack, his family, came first. He rallied his remaining loyal forces, his golden eyes blazing with grim determination. Elara, despite her own fear, stood by his side. Her goal was to help Liam, to be his strength, but her body betrayed her. She knew the emotional toll of the impending conflict would be immense, a direct threat to her fragile heart. They moved swiftly, a small, desperate army racing against time to the Omega Sanctuary. The air grew heavy with the scent of fear and the acrid tang of battle. When they arrived, the scene was chaos. Kyle's forces, larger and more brutal than anticipated, had already breached the outer defenses. The sounds of growls, snarls, and desperate cries filled the air. Liam, distracted and emotionally compromised by the corporate collapse and the rival Alpha's attack, made a tactical error. He overextended, driven by a desperate need to protect. This led to a direct, brutal confrontation. Kale, a hulking brute with eyes as cold as a winter moon, emerged from the fray, singling out Liam. "Thorne!" he roared, his voice thick with triumph. "Your empire falls. Your mate will be mine." The words, a direct threat to Elara, sliced through her. Her heart lurched, a violent tremor. She watched in horror as Kale, with a savage roar, landed a devastating blow on Liam, sending him staggering. Liam's beta, Marcus, rushed to his side, but Kale's forces swarmed them. Liam, weakened by the corporate betrayal and the emotional weight of his pack's suffering, was losing ground. He was fighting with the ferocity of a cornered animal, but his strength was waning. Elara's world narrowed. She saw Liam fall to one knee, a gash bleeding on his temple. She saw Marcus struggling, overwhelmed. She saw the terrified faces of the Omegas huddled in the sanctuary, their eyes wide with fear. An overwhelming surge of emotion, grief, fear, helplessness, and a terrifying, desperate love for Liam crashed over her like a tidal wave. Her carefully constructed emotional walls shattered. Her heart hammered, a frantic, irregular rhythm that vibrated through her entire body. Her breath caught, a searing pain in her chest. This was it. The price of connection. The ultimate betrayal by her own body. Her vision swam, blurring at the edges, then darkening. She felt utter despair and the crushing weight of her own perceived inadequacy, believing her condition had made her a fatal liability to Liam and his pack. The core emotional question, can Elara truly find freedom and love by embracing her deepest vulnerability, or will her hidden fragility always make her a liability, forcing her to live a life of emotional isolation? Felt answered in the most devastating way. Her fragility was a liability. Her love for Liam, her connection to him, was literally killing her. Elara collapsed, her legs giving out beneath her. Her heart threatened to give out, a final, desperate flutter. Her last conscious thought was a profound sense of failure, a chilling certainty that her love for Liam would be her undoing. The sounds of the battle faded, replaced by the roaring in her ears, a desolate symphony of defeat. The world was a kaleidoscope of pain and fading light. Elara drifted in and out of consciousness, tethered to reality by the dull ache in her chest and the faint, rhythmic beep of medical machinery. She was in the infirmary of Liam's estate, a sterile white room that felt miles away from the chaos outside. Her goal was simply to survive, but she felt a profound sense of resignation, believing she was indeed a liability, and that her desire for love and freedom was a dangerous fantasy. Liam was there, always there. His face was etched with a raw, desperate fear, his golden eyes shadowed with guilt. He held her hand, his touch gentle, almost reverent, as if she were made of glass. He was consumed by guilt and fear, believing he had led her to this point, and that her fragility made their bond impossible. He blamed himself, his ruthless nature, his possessiveness that had dragged her into his dangerous world. He confronted his own past trauma, the pain of Camilla's betrayal, realizing his controlling nature had only endangered Elara, just as it had cost him so much before. "I can't lose you," he rasped, his voice rough with unshed tears. "Not again." He spoke of letting her go, of sending her away, believing it was the only way to save her, even if it destroyed him. His words, though meant to protect, were a fresh wound to Elara's soul. They reinforced her deepest fear, that her vulnerability made her unworthy of love and connection, that she was destined for emotional isolation. In her semi-conscious state, Elara experienced vivid flashbacks, a torrent of memories. She saw herself as a child, confined to her bed, her parents' faces etched with worry, their voices hushed, treating her like a fragile doll. She saw the pity in their eyes, the way they controlled her environment, limiting her experiences for her own good, She recalled moments where she felt controlled or dismissed due to her health, reinforcing her deep-seated fear of being a burden. "You're too delicate, Elara. You can't handle this. You're a risk." These were the echoes of her past, now amplified by her present predicament. She saw Liam's face, distorted by guilt, and felt the crushing weight of his despair. The core emotional question: can Elara truly find freedom and love by embracing her deepest vulnerability, or will her hidden fragility always make her a liability, forcing her to live a life of emotional isolation, seemed to be answered with a resounding, heartbreaking no. Her fragility was a liability. Freedom and love, true connection, seemed impossible. She was a burden, a weakness to anyone who dared to care for her. This was the absolute lowest point. Elara's internal misbelief was at its peak. Liam's character was also at a breaking point, forcing him to confront his own flaws. The room was silent, save for the faint, irregular beat of Elara's heart monitor, a symbol of their fading hope. The quiet that followed was profound, a desolate symphony of defeat. The world outside, with its crumbling empires and warring alphas, faded into insignificance. All that remained was the crushing weight of their shared despair and the terrifying realization that love, for them, might be a luxury they could never afford. The sterile white walls of the infirmary felt like a tomb. Elara drifted, a ghost between worlds, the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor a constant, mocking reminder of her fragility. Her body was weak, a hollow shell, but her mind was finally clear. The despair that had consumed her in Act 6, the crushing belief that her vulnerability made her a liability, began to recede, replaced by a quiet, burning ember of defiance. No. A single word, whispered in the silence of her thoughts. No, I am not a burden. I am not weak. She remembered the fear in Liam's eyes, the raw guilt that had twisted his handsome face. He believed he had broken her. He believed her love for him was her undoing. But lying there, stripped bare of all pretense, Elara saw the truth. Hiding her condition, living in constant fear of exposure, that was the real prison. That was what had isolated her, not the condition itself. Her fierce will to live, her innate resilience. Those were her true strengths, forged in the crucible of constant self-preservation. She felt a surge of quiet determination, a new sense of self-acceptance, blossoming in her chest. Meanwhile, Liam, hunched by her bedside, was waging his own war. His golden eyes, usually so commanding, were shadowed with a despair that mirrored hers. He had faced his deepest fear, losing her, just as he had lost Camilla. The pain of past betrayal, the possessive need to control, had led him to this precipice. He had almost destroyed the very thing he sought to protect. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a ragged sigh escaping his lips. "Elara," he rasped, his voice raw. I was wrong. So wrong." He looked at her then, his gaze piercing, vulnerable. "My need to control, to claim, it nearly cost you everything. It nearly cost me everything." He squeezed her hand, his touch gentle, almost reverent. "I swore I'd never be weak again, never let anyone close enough to hurt me. But seeing you like this, it's a different kind of pain. A pain I can't bear." His voice trembled. "True love means partnership, not control. It means fighting with you, not for you. It means embracing your vulnerability, because it's part of who you are. And I want all of you, Elara. Every fragile, resilient, beautiful part." His apology, raw and honest, resonated deep within her. It was the balm her wounded soul needed. The core emotional question: can Elara truly find freedom and love by embracing her deepest vulnerability? Or will her hidden fragility always make her a liability, forcing her to live a life of emotional isolation? Began to reframe itself. It wasn't about being a liability. It was about finding someone who saw her vulnerability as a facet of her strength, not a weakness. It was about shared burdens, shared triumphs. With newfound resolve, Elara slowly, painstakingly, pushed herself up, her muscles protesting, but her spirit soaring. Her eyes, still a little weak, met Liam's. A silent promise passed between them, a vow deeper than any ancient pact. Their relationship, nearly broken, was reborn on a foundation of mutual trust and acceptance, a fragile seed of hope in the desolate landscape of their despair. The air thickened with unspoken emotions, a silent affirmation of their new beginning. This was the turning point from despair. The climb back had begun. The infirmary, once a symbol of despair, now hummed with a quiet, determined energy. Elara, though still recovering, was no longer a patient. She was a strategist. Her goal was to execute their plan with precision, leveraging her unique skills, because she was no longer just fighting for survival. She was fighting for a future, for true freedom, for a love that had blossomed amidst chaos. Liam, transformed by his own crucible of guilt and fear, now moved with a focused intensity, his alpha power tempered by a newfound humility. He listened to Elara, truly listened, his golden eyes reflecting her ideas. They were a united front, two halves of a formidable whole. Alaric's network is vast, Elara explained, tracing lines on a holographic map that pulsed with data. But he's arrogant. He'll have a central hub, a digital vault where he stored all his incriminating evidence, proof of his collusion with Kale. Her mind, sharp and analytical, was a weapon. She felt a powerful sense of agency and purpose, no longer a victim but an active participant, driven by love and a desire for true freedom. Liam nodded, his jaw tight. And Kale, he'll be expecting us to defend. We need a diversion, something massive, something that draws his main forces away from Alaric's stronghold. His voice was a low growl, but it was a strategic one. Their plan began to take shape, a daring, two-pronged attack. Elara would devise a way to expose Alaric, using her understanding of human corporate structures to unravel his digital web. Liam, leveraging his remaining pack loyalty and raw alpha power, would prepare to confront the rival alpha, drawing him into a decisive battle. They needed allies, loyal ones. "Marcus," Liam called, his voice echoing in the large room. "And Anya, bring them in." Marcus, the loyal beta, entered, his face etched with exhaustion but his eyes burning with renewed hope. Anya, usually so stoic, showed a flicker of surprise at Elara's prominent position. Liam laid out the plan, his voice clear and commanding, but with a new note of partnership. "Elara has devised the strategy to expose Alaric. We will work together." Anya, usually so reserved, looked at Elara with a new respect. "Your insights into human systems, they are invaluable," she admitted, a rare smile touching her lips. Marcus, too, nodded, his gaze steady. "We are with you, Alpha. Both of you." They sought out a few other key, loyal allies. A grizzled old warrior who had lost family to Kale's raids, a young tech expert who had always been sidelined by Alaric. Elara spoke to them, not as Liam's mate but as a leader, convincing them of their new unified vision. She explained the depth of Alaric's betrayal, the true threat Kale posed, and the benevolent future Liam envisioned. She told them about her own vulnerability, not as a weakness, but as a shared burden, a reason to fight for a world where everyone was accepted. Her sincerity, her quiet strength, resonated deeply. The night before the final confrontation, the estate was a hive of quiet activity. Maps were spread, weapons were checked, strategies refined. Elara and Liam, in the quiet solitude of his study, shared a moment of profound intimacy. His scent, a mix of forest and power, enveloped her. He pulled her close, his arms strong around her. "Are you ready?" he murmured, his breath warm against her hair. "As I'll ever be," she whispered, her heart full, not with fear, but with a fierce, reciprocal love. Their bond, forged in fire and vulnerability, was an unbreakable force. This scene showcased Elara's active contribution and leadership, demonstrating her growth. It highlighted their combined strengths and the power of their partnership, preparing them for the ultimate confrontation. The freedom and love aspect of the core question was now actively pursued, a silent affirmation of the future they were fighting for, knowing the immense risks ahead. The night air was a cold, sharp blade against Elara's skin. The estate, usually a beacon of light, was cloaked in strategic darkness, its defenses subtly shifted for their daring offensive. The sounds of the escalating conflict outside, the distant growls, the faint crackle of energy, the shouts of Liam's diversionary forces engaging Kale's pack, echoed like a primal war drum. Elara's heart pounded, but it was a steady, powerful rhythm, not the frantic flutter of fear. Her goal was clear: secure the evidence that would expose Alaric, because this was the key to dismantling both threats. She moved like a shadow, clad in dark tactical gear that felt strangely empowering. Liam was a silent, formidable presence beside her, his golden eyes scanning the darkness, his senses alert. Marcus and Anya were with them, a small, elite team. Their target, Alaric's private data vault, hidden deep within a seemingly abandoned corporate building in the city's industrial district. This was the corporate betrayer's stronghold, a digital fortress designed to protect his secrets. "The main power grid is down," Marcus whispered into his comms. "Kyle's forces are fully engaged with our diversionary team." "Good," Liam rumbled, his voice a low, predatory purr. "Less resistance here." Elara, despite the inherent emotional stress of the mission, remained remarkably calm and focused. The past weeks had forged her into something new, something stronger. She drew on her inner strength, on the unwavering resolve she had found in the infirmary. Her previous fears of emotional overload were replaced by a fierce determination. She was Liam's partner, his equal in this fight, and her mind was her weapon. They breached the building's defenses with practiced ease, Liam's brute strength complementing Marcus's precision and Anya's silent efficiency. The interior was a maze of dark corridors, smelling of dust and stale air. They moved through it like ghosts, their footsteps barely whispers. Elara led the way to the server room, her knowledge of Alaric's digital footprint guiding them through the labyrinthine network cables and humming machinery. "Here," she breathed, pointing to a reinforced door. "This is it, his personal vault." Liam nodded, his jaw tight. He placed a powerful hand on the door, his muscles coiling. "Stand back!" As he prepared to force the door, a sudden piercing shriek ripped through the building's internal comms. Alaric's voice, distorted by static, filled with rage. "Thorne! You fool! You think you can stop me? I have everything, and your little human, she'll be the first to fall." The taunt was meant to break them, to ignite Liam's fury and Elara's fear. But it had the opposite effect. It solidified their resolve. Liam's eyes blazed, not with blind rage, but with a cold, terrifying focus. Elara felt a heightened sense of anticipation and unwavering resolve, her previous fears of emotional overload replaced by a fierce determination. This was it. The point of direct confrontation was imminent. Liam burst through the door, a blur of power. Inside, Alaric stood, surrounded by glowing screens, his face contorted in a sneer. He was not alone. 2 hulking armed shifters, Kale's elite guards, flanked him. The air thickened. The space between them burned. This scene built intense tension as they executed the initial stages of their plan. It showcased Elara's newfound courage and control over her condition in high-pressure situations, demonstrating her transformation. It led directly into the climax, setting the stage for the ultimate test of their bond and individual strengths. The sounds of the escalating conflict outside echoed, signaling that the final confrontation was upon them, a symphony of destruction and desperate hope. The air in Alaric's data vault vibrated with a raw primal energy. Liam, a blur of muscle and fury, engaged Kale's elite guards, his growls echoing in the confined space. Elara, however, ignored the immediate physical threat. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with a fierce, unwavering resolve. Her goal was clear: secure justice and ensure their future. She moved with purpose, her fingers flying across the console where Alaric stood, a sneer on his face, surrounded by his glowing screens. "You think you've won, little human?" Alaric sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. Liam's empire is crumbling, and you're just a fragile toy, easily broken. I'm not fragile, Elara retorted, her voice steady, laced with a newfound steel. And I'm not a toy, she typed furiously, her mind a whirlwind of code and data. She had seen the vulnerabilities in his system, the hidden backdoors he thought only he knew. Because she understood human greed, she knew exactly where he would hide his most damning secrets. You underestimated me, Alaric. You underestimated us. Just like that, a massive, encrypted file began to upload to a public server. Its progress bar a defiant green against the red alerts Alaric's system was now screaming. It was the irrefutable evidence: financial fraud, corporate espionage, and the damning communications with Kale. This, Elara declared, her voice ringing with triumph, is your downfall, Alaric. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal, broadcast to the world. Alaric's eyes widened in horror. No, you can't. He lunged at her, a desperate feral snarl ripping from his throat. But then a blur of golden-eyed fury intercepted him. Liam, having dispatched the guards with brutal efficiency, slammed Alaric against the wall. His grip was iron, his face a mask of cold, righteous rage. You betrayed my pack, Liam snarled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. You betrayed us. Meanwhile, Kyle, the rival Alpha, burst through a shattered wall, drawn by the chaos. He was a beast of a man, his eyes burning with savage triumph, his gaze fixed on Elara. The mate is mine, he roared, lunging past Liam, directly for her. Elara's heart surged, a powerful, protective instinct overriding all fear. She saw Kale's trajectory, saw the glint of a hidden blade. Her body moved on instinct. She grabbed a heavy metal data drive from the console, spinning and throwing it with all her might. It struck Kale squarely in the head, a surprising, solid thud that momentarily disoriented him. It wasn't a powerful blow, but it was enough. It was a crucial distraction. That's why Liam had the opening he needed. He spun, his movements fluid, his golden eyes blazing with a fierce protectiveness. He met Kale's charge, not with brute force alone, but with a strategic precision born of his transformation. He didn't just fight to dominate, he fought to protect, to secure, to lead. The fight was brutal, a clash of two alphas, but Liam, choosing love and genuine partnership over control, defeated Kale not through sheer dominance, but by demonstrating a new benevolent leadership that won over disillusioned pack members who had witnessed Kale's ruthless disregard for life. He disarmed Kale, his movements swift and decisive, pinning him to the ground. This territory is protected, Liam stated, his voice resonating with ancient power, by a bond stronger than any ambition. The dust settled. The antagonists were defeated. Elara's heart, though still racing from the intensity, beat with a strong, steady rhythm. She had faced extreme emotional pressure and she had not succumbed. Instead, she had actively assisted Liam, proving her strength and resilience. She looked at Liam, victorious, his chest heaving, his golden eyes locking onto hers. In that moment, the central conflict was resolved, and the core emotional question was answered definitively. Elara could find freedom and love by embracing her vulnerability, and it made her stronger, not a liability. Their hands clasped, a silent promise, a symbol of their unbreakable bond, forged in the fires of battle and vulnerability. The immediate aftermath began, not with silence, but with the quiet hum of a new beginning. In the quiet that followed the climax, the air still thick with the scent of ozone and triumph, Liam didn't waste a single moment. His corporate empire, once a symbol of ruthless power, was now in shambles, but it was a deliberate dismantling, not a collapse. His goal was to rebuild, to restructure, to create a benevolent enterprise that benefited both humans and shifters, because he had learned that true power lay in partnership, not control. Weeks later, the news cycles were still reeling from the exposé. Alaric was arrested, his network of corruption unraveling. Kale, stripped of his power and influence, was banished, His pack splintered and absorbed into Liam's now growing ranks. Liam, however, didn't gloat. Instead, he held a series of unprecedented press conferences, not from a position of arrogance, but of humility and vision. He announced the complete overhaul of Thorne Enterprises. "We will no longer operate solely for profit," Liam declared, his voice resonating with a new kind of authority, one built on integrity. "Our focus will shift to sustainable practices, community welfare, and fostering a symbiotic relationship between the human and shifter worlds." He spoke of investing in green energy, of creating educational programs for young shifters, of establishing safe havens for those displaced by conflict. Elara, now openly acknowledged as his partner, stood by his side, her presence a quiet but powerful statement. She actively participated in these discussions, her keen intellect offering insights, her compassionate heart guiding the ethical direction of the new venture. She was no longer just a mate. She was a co-leader, a visionary. Meanwhile, the estate's infirmary, once a place of despair for Elara, became a hub of healing. Liam and Elara personally tended to the wounded, both physical and emotional, within the pack. Liam, with a newfound tenderness, visited the Omegas, offering comfort and reassurance. Elara, her own heart now strong and steady, sat with injured shifters, listening to their stories, her empathy a balm. She understood their pain, because she had faced her own vulnerability and emerged stronger. This scene showed the immediate consequences of the climax and the beginning of the new equilibrium. It reinforced Liam's transformation and Elara's integral role in his new vision, showcasing their partnership. As a result, trust began to bloom. Disillusioned pack members, once fearful of Liam's ruthless reputation, now saw a different Alpha, one who led with compassion and vision. Humans who had viewed shifters with suspicion now saw a path to coexistence. The air on the estate, once heavy with tension, now hummed with a quiet, hopeful energy. Liam had dismantled his empire, yes, but he was building something far greater in its place. Weeks later, a newly designed logo for their benevolent enterprise was unveiled. It was a sleek, modern design, but subtly incorporated elements of both Elara's and Liam's heritage. A stylized wolf's head intertwined with a delicate, blooming lotus flower, signifying their unity, their strength, and their shared vision for a future where vulnerability was a pathway to connection, not a liability. The symbol was more than just a brand. It was a promise, a testament to the new world they were building, together. Months later, the benevolent enterprise flourished, a testament to Liam's transformed leadership and Elara's unwavering partnership. The estate, once a gilded cage, was now a vibrant hub of activity, a place where humans and shifters worked side by side, building a future together. Elara and Liam were seen working side by side, managing their benevolent enterprise, their love evident in every interaction. Their bond, once forged in fear and forced proximity, had deepened into something profound, something truly extraordinary. Elara's health was stable, managed not through fear and isolation, but through open communication and Liam's unwavering, supportive presence. Her heart, once so fragile, now beat with a strong, steady rhythm, a testament to her resilience and the healing power of acceptance. She no longer hid her condition. It was simply a part of her, understood and embraced by the man who loved her. She felt it, clear as day, the profound peace that settled over her, a peace she had never dared to dream of. They were seen in simple, quiet moments, walking hand in hand through the thriving community they had helped build, their laughter echoing through the trees, or sharing a quiet evening in Liam's study, his arm around her, the weight of his presence a comforting anchor. Their bond symbolized not just romance, but also profound personal growth and the acceptance of vulnerabilities. Liam, once the ruthless Alpha, now led with a gentle strength, his golden eyes filled with a love that softened his formidable features. Elara, once the terrified, guarded woman, now moved with a quiet confidence, her spirit unbound. Her world tilted, but this time it was with joy, with love, with the sheer wonder of it all. She had found true freedom, not in escaping, but in embracing her deepest vulnerability and finding a partner who loved her for every facet of her being. She often pondered, looking back, who would have thought that being stolen would lead me to true freedom and a love beyond compare? Her voice trembled, but it was with emotion, not fear. The space between them burned, not with tension, but with the quiet, powerful flame of their shared life. Her chest ached, not with pain, but with the expansive joy of a heart finally unbound. In the quiet that followed as the echo of their journey faded, her name hung in the air, whispered by the wind, carried by the scent of pine and the promise of forever. Her bones remembered him. Her soul answered. As the mark tingled, her wolf pressed forward, and she let it happen. The story concluded, not with a final period, but with the lingering warmth of a fairy tale happily ever after, a testament to love, resilience, and the courage to truly live.